Television is a strange machine. It takes people who may have nothing in common, locks them in a room together for months, sometimes years, and asks them to pretend they love each other. Usually it works, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes the tension behind the scenes becomes more dramatic than anything written in the script. What you are about to hear involves lawsuits, band reunions, screaming voicemails played in public, and co-stars who reportedly couldn't stand to be in the same room, yet somehow kept the cameras rolling and the audience laughing. Here are 12 shocking stories of sitcom actors who hated each other in real life. The married couple who despised each other. Vivian Vance and William Frawley played Ethel and Fred Mertz on I Love Lucy, one of the most beloved sitcoms ever made. On screen, they were the ultimate bickering married couple grumbling at each other with perfect comic timing, their squabbles providing the perfect counterweight to Lucy and Ricky's antics. What audiences never knew was that the bickering was not entirely an act. The trouble reportedly started almost from the beginning. Vance was in her early 40s when the show launched, while Frawley was in his mid-60s. According to accounts in I Love Lucy producer Jess Oppenheimer's biography, Vance resented having to play wife to someone she reportedly described as that old coot, and was bothered that audiences so readily accepted the pairing. Frawley overheard her complaints about the age gap and, by most accounts, never forgave her. He is said to have fired back by pushing for lines that mocked Ethel's figure, and the resentment between the two quietly hardened into something permanent. Frawley reportedly once said of Vance, "She's one of the finest girls to come out of Kansas, but I often wish she'd go back there." That about captures the warmth between them. The two never made peace. And when the show ended and a Fred and Ethel spin-off was proposed, Vance turned it down flat, even reportedly walking away from a $50,000 bonus because she could not face more time working alongside Frawley. When Frawley died in 1966, Vance reportedly raised a glass in celebration. For 6 seasons, they played a couple the whole country adored. Off-camera, they were sworn enemies. The feud that killed the show. When the Fox sitcom Martin debuted in 1992, it became one of the most popular comedies on television. Martin Lawrence played a loud, lovable Detroit DJ, and Tisha Campbell played Gina, his girlfriend and later his wife. Their chemistry was electric. Their real-life relationship was something else entirely. According to court documents filed in January of 1997, Campbell abruptly walked off the show during its 5th season, citing what she described as intolerable working conditions. The lawsuit she subsequently filed detailed allegations of sexual harassment, sexual battery, verbal abuse, and physical threats, with a season-by-season account of what she claimed was Lawrence's increasingly erratic and hostile behavior on set. She alleged that by the 5th season, Lawrence was, in the words of the filing, simply out of control. The suit claimed she had been hospitalized due to the stress caused by her co-star, and that she feared for her safety. The studio sued Campbell to force her back to complete the season. She countersued. Both sides eventually reached an out-of-court settlement, but the terms were extraordinary. Campbell agreed to return and film the final episodes of the show, only under the condition that she and Lawrence would never be on set at the same time. The season finale, When You Know What You Are Looking For, plays like an elaborate magic trick. The two leads seemingly in the same scenes without ever actually sharing the same space. Lawrence has denied the allegations, calling them false. The show ended. Both have since spoken warmly about each other in public and reunited for a special years later. But the damage to one of the 90s most beloved sitcoms was done. The star who couldn't share the spotlight. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air made Will Smith one of the biggest stars in the world. For Janet Hubert, who played Aunt Vivian Banks for the show's first 3 seasons, the experience ended in a way she described, for nearly 3 decades, as being banished. The feud that followed became one of Hollywood's longest-running grudge matches. Hubert departed the show after the 3rd season, officially over a contract dispute. NBC had reportedly offered her a deal that limited her to 10 weeks of work, while prohibiting her from taking other jobs. Her agent advised her not to accept it, but the renegotiation never came through, and she was replaced by Daphne Maxwell Reid. Smith, speaking publicly at the time, suggested that Hubert had been difficult on set and had brought her problems to work. Comments that followed her for years and, by her own account, effectively ended her career. What Smith didn't know, or couldn't have fully understood at the time, was what Hubert later revealed during the show's 2020 reunion on HBO Max. She had been pregnant during the 3rd season and was living through what she described as a deeply abusive marriage, unable to speak about any of it on set. "I just stopped talking to everybody because I didn't know who to trust," she said, "and I felt like you hated me. "I could not do a 30-year celebration of this show and not celebrate you." Smith acknowledged with visible emotion that he had made the set difficult for her. After nearly 3 decades of public animosity, the two finally apologized to each other on camera, a reunion that, for many fans, meant as much as the show itself ever had. The Witch Who Got the Other Witch Fired. Charmed was a hit from almost the moment it premiered in 1998. 3 sisters, bound by witchcraft, fighting demons in San Francisco. It was the kind of premise that should have been enough drama. It wasn't. Behind the scenes, a conflict was building between original cast members Shannon Doherty and Alyssa Milano that would eventually force one of them off the show entirely. According to Doherty and co-star Holly Marie Combs, who discussed the situation in detail on Doherty's podcast in 2023, the tension began early. Doherty had been cast first, and the show had been sold to the network partly on the strength of her name. When promotional materials began to center on her, reportedly at the expense of Milano and Combs, resentment started to build. "There was a lack of female support," Doherty said. "Neither woman concealed her feelings about the other for long." What Combs revealed on the podcast was startling. She claimed that a show producer told her Milano had gone to network and studio executives with a stark ultimatum: either Doherty goes or Milano would sue for a hostile work environment. According to Combs, the producer said they were backed into a corner. Milano, for her part, has stated that she did not have the power to fire anyone, and that the studio and network made the decision based on documented testimony from cast and crew. What is not in dispute is the outcome. After 3 seasons, Doherty's character was killed off, and Rose McGowan was brought in to replace her. Doherty was not told publicly that she had been fired. Her team advised her to say she had chosen to leave, reportedly telling her that her career would not survive another firing. She laughed at the suggestion, she said, because she knew no one would believe she had willingly walked away from a hit show. She was right. 50 years of not getting along. In the history of television feuds, few have aged quite like the one between William Shatner and George Takei. The 2 men played Captain Kirk and Helmsman Sulu on Star Trek, the original series starting in the late 1960s, and by most accounts, have not gotten along since. That is not an exaggeration. They have been taking shots at each other, in memoirs, in interviews, in social media posts, and at public events, for more than half a century. Takei's complaints about Shatner have been remarkably consistent across the decades, that Shatner was not a team player, that he was consumed by the need to be the center of attention, and that he would sometimes maneuver to have other actors' screen time reduced in favor of his own. In his 1994 autobiography, Takei alleged that Shatner had a script change for one of the Star Trek films to prevent Sulu from taking command of a starship. Takei has also claimed that Shatner was not invited to his 2008 wedding, an event attended by fellow cast members, including Walter Koenig, because of the years of accumulated bad feeling. Shatner's response to all of it has generally been a mixture of bewilderment and dismissal. He has suggested that he barely knew Takei, pointing out that Takei was not in every episode and was effectively a supporting player. He claims 50-plus years ago, "I took away a camera angle that denied him 30 more seconds of primetime TV," Shatner once posted. When Takei made pointed remarks about Shatner's trip to space in 2021, calling him an unfit specimen, Shatner shot back, "Don't hate George. The only time he gets press is when he talks bad about me." Both men are now in their 80s and 90s. The feud, by all appearances, is going with them to the end. The show that ended because she said no. The Golden Girls is remembered as one of the warmest, funniest, and most groundbreaking sitcoms in American television history. 4 older women living together in Miami, becoming unlikely family. On screen, Dorothy, Rose, Blanche, and Sophia were inseparable. Off-screen, 2 of the 4 women who played them, reportedly, could not stand to be around each other. The feud, largely one-sided, by most accounts ran between B. Arthur, who played Dorothy, and Betty White, who played Rose. For years, it was speculated about, but never confirmed. Then, in 2025, co-producer Marsha Posner Williams addressed it directly during a panel marking the show's 40th anniversary. Her summary was blunt. "When that red light was on," she said, "there were no more professional people than those women. But when the red light was off, those 2 couldn't warm up to each other if they were cremated together." Williams also recalled Arthur phoning her at home to vent, repeatedly and colorfully, about her co-star. The theories about what caused it vary. Some point to the fact that White won the show's first Emmy, which reportedly left Arthur furious. Others suggest that Arthur, who came from a theatrical background, looked down on White's television roots and resented the way White would break character during tapings to chat with the live studio audience. Arthur's son has confirmed that his mother found the habit maddening, saying it wasn't the right time to talk to fans between takes. What ended the show, according to Williams, was simple. When the 7th season contracts came up for renewal, 3 of the 4 women said yes to continuing. B. Arthur reportedly said no, emphatically. The voicemail heard around Hollywood. When Community premiered in 2009, it brought together a smart, diverse cast built around a study group at a fictional community college. It also brought together Dan Harmon, its creator, showrunner, and self-described difficult person, and Chevy Chase, a Saturday Night Live legend whose reputation for being difficult on set had preceded him by decades. The collision was, by many accounts, inevitable. Chase had been cast as Pierce Hawthorne, the group's oldest and most politically incorrect member. From the beginning, reports suggest that Chase struggled with the role. He reportedly couldn't understand why certain scenes were supposed to be funny, would frequently leave set early, and sometimes walked away from scenes he didn't like without filming them. Showrunner Harmon, meanwhile, was working through his own issues with scripts, executives, and what he described as Chase's refusal to access the emotional core of the character. I'd say to him, "Do you understand that what you're saying is funny, and it makes an interesting character?" Harmon recalled. He would kind of blink and stare at me and go, "Whatever, I just don't think it's funny." The breaking point came at the end of the 3rd season. Chase reportedly walked off set without filming a key scene from the finale. At the wrap party the following day, Harmon stood up and led the assembled cast and crew in a group profanity-laden farewell directed at Chase. Chase left the party and called Harmon, leaving a voice message that became so infamous Harmon eventually played it publicly at one of his own events, after which it leaked to the internet. It was, by all accounts, spectacular. The two eventually patched things up, but Chase was written off the show not long after. Harmon later said even he wasn't sure it would be legally possible for Chase to return for the eventual Community movie. Two sides of the same battery. Glee ran for 6 seasons on Fox and became a cultural phenomenon, but few of its storylines were as closely watched by fans as the one playing out behind the scenes between its 2 biggest female stars. Lea Michele, who played overachiever Rachel Berry, and Naya Rivera, who played scene-stealing Santana Lopez, reportedly had a tension-filled relationship for much of the show's run. A tension that Rivera, in her own words, called real but complicated. In her 2016 memoir, Rivera wrote about the situation with notable candor. She described the dynamic between herself and Michele using the words a Glee writer had offered her, that they were like 2 sides of the same battery. "We are both strong-willed and competitive," she wrote, "not just with each other but with everyone, and that's not a good mixture." The trouble, by Rivera's account, grew more pronounced as her character Santana became increasingly prominent on the show. She wrote plainly that she believed Michele didn't like sharing the spotlight, and that when Michele was having a bad day professionally, it had a way of spilling into their off-screen interactions. "She had a hard time separating work from our outside friendship," Rivera wrote. By the final season, Rivera said, Michele had stopped speaking to her entirely. Rivera acknowledged, however, that the public narrative of a full-blown feud was blown out of proportion, and that the more complex truth was 2 competitive, driven people who brought the best and worst out in each other. Rivera died, tragically, in July 2020. The question of what was real and what was exaggerated between the 2 women will remain permanently unresolved, and in light of everything that followed, the feud itself feels like a distant and somewhat bittersweet footnote, a power play that never ended. Sex and the City ran for 6 seasons on HBO, following 4 women navigating love, friendship, and designer shoes in New York City. Sarah Jessica Parker played Carrie Bradshaw. Kim Cattrall played Samantha Jones. For most of the show's run, they presented a united front to the public. Privately, accounts suggest the relationship between the 2 women was more complicated, and eventually, it fell apart in public in a way that reshaped the franchise permanently. The first serious cracks appeared around the time of a proposed 3rd Sex and the City film, when it became clear that Cattrall would not be participating. Reports at the time suggested Cattrall had linked her involvement to certain requests of the studio, requests the studio declined to meet. What followed was a period of escalating public statements. Cattrall, in a 2017 interview, described her relationship with Parker as toxic and said clearly that the two had never really been friends, only colleagues. Parker, by her own account, did not respond publicly, which she has maintained throughout. "There has been one person talking," she said in a later interview. The moment that crystallized the feud for the public came in 2018, when Cattrall lost her brother and Parker publicly offered her condolences on Instagram. Cattrall responded by telling Parker, directly and publicly, "You are not my friend." When And Just Like That, the revival, was eventually produced, Cattrall was not in it, a fact the writers worked around by having Samantha send text from London. By 2023, Cattrall agreed to a brief cameo filmed entirely separately from the rest of the cast. Both women have continued, in their own ways, to have the last word. Neither seems to have won. The firing everybody pretended not to know about. Andy Griffith played Sheriff Andy Taylor for 8 seasons on The Andy Griffith Show, making the character one of the most beloved in American television history. Frances Bavier played Aunt Bee, Andy's warm-hearted aunt who kept the household running in the fictional town of Mayberry. Audiences adored them together. Behind the scenes, by multiple accounts, the relationship between the two was difficult from the very beginning. Griffith has acknowledged, across several interviews over the years, that he and Bavier clashed frequently during filming. The nature of the tension was reportedly rooted in Bavier's relationship to the role itself. She was a trained stage actress who reportedly hated playing the domestic, homespun Aunt Bee, feeling trapped by the character and frustrated by what she saw as the loss of her own identity. Ron Howard, who played Opie on the show as a child, later recalled that he never had the sense that Bavier particularly enjoyed being around children, a challenge on a show whose emotional center was largely built around a child's perspective. Bavier also reportedly bristled at Griffith's casualness on set and his willingness to ad-lib, which clashed with her more rigidly trained approach. What is perhaps most striking about this particular feud is how completely it was hidden from audiences. The show ran for 8 seasons, and Bavier won an Emmy for her performance in 1967. In perhaps the strangest postscript, Bavier eventually retired to Siler City, North Carolina, a town frequently mentioned on the show, which was set in North Carolina and based on Griffith's own hometown. Griffith has said that shortly before Bavier's death, she called him to make amends, and that the two were finally able to put things right. Whether that conversation fully resolved what had festered for years on set, only the two of them ever knew. The actress who refused to go quietly. Charlie Sheen's career has produced more than its share of behind-the-scenes drama. But one of the less discussed chapters involves his behavior toward a co-star on anger management, the sitcom he starred in and executive produced following his departure from 2.5 Men. Selma Blair played his character's love interest on the show, and by several accounts, the working relationship between the two deteriorated into something genuinely hostile. According to reporting by The Hollywood Reporter, tensions came to a head when Blair, reportedly frustrated with Sheen's work ethic and what she perceived as a lack of professionalism on set, raised her concerns. The response, reportedly, was swift and disproportionate. Sheen allegedly dismissed Blair via a text message described as crude and dismissive in the extreme, and then moved to have her fired from the show entirely. As an executive producer, he had the leverage to do exactly that, and Blair was subsequently let go. What made the situation unusual, beyond the raw power dynamics at play, was the way it illustrated how executive producer credits on television can blur the line between creative collaboration and workplace control. Blair had little recourse. Sheen had structural authority over the production, and the normal mechanisms for handling a dispute between coworkers didn't apply in the same way. The story added another layer to an already complicated public narrative around Sheen during that period of his career. Blair has since spoken about the experience as a difficult one. Sheen has not, to any notable extent, addressed it publicly. The feud that kept going for 7 seasons. The Golden Girls ended in 1992, and the show has remained in continuous rotation somewhere on television ever since. The 4 performances at its center are universally celebrated, which is what makes the behind-the-scenes story of Betty White and Bea Arthur so quietly fascinating. Because the professionalism both women maintained on camera was apparently a sustained, conscious act of discipline over 7 full years of genuine personal antipathy. The strange thing about this feud is that it seems to have had no single dramatic origin. White, by various accounts, did not particularly dislike Arthur. The hostility appeared to run primarily in one direction. Arthur, according to those who worked closely with her, found White's relentlessly sunny disposition irritating and reportedly viewed her approach to the craft as less serious than her own Broadway-trained sensibility. When White won the show's first Emmy in the category of Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series, leaving the other 3 cast members without awards that year, it reportedly made things considerably worse. The detail that sticks most, though, comes from co-producer Marsha Posner Williams. She recalled Arthur calling her at home to vent about White on a regular basis. She recalled Arthur using a crude slur to describe White in front of her husband at dinner. She recalled Arthur using the same word, seated next to White. On a flight, the 2 women were, by every technical measure, professionals to the end. But what Williams described made clear that the warmth of the Golden Girls, the cheesecake, the friendship, the late-night kitchen conversations, was entirely on the page. Off the page, at least between 2 of its stars, it was one of the more remarkable performances either of them ever gave.